Last July, an infantry officer was removed from command by the Idaho National Guard after a complaint was filed over his public expression of his religious beliefs and political views on matters of truth and decency, morality, including human sexuality. And prior to that, in fact, he was pressured to resign regarding public statements that he had made outside the military environment. Well, our friends at Liberty Counsel have stepped in on that officer's behalf, and they are looking to set things right. Joining me now to discuss this is Daniel Schmid, Liberty Counsel's Associate Vice President of Legal Affairs. Daniel, welcome to Washington Watch. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so to the extent that you can, let's go into greater detail about what exactly happened.
Yes, well, as you mentioned, an infantry officer has been, a complaint was filed against him. And then immediately upon receipt of the complaint, some of the superiors in his chain of command brought him in and said, "You will resign or we'll make this ugly." Those were the words to him. They forced him to resign without counsel, without the presence of counsel, and without advice of counsel. And as soon as he contacted us, we instructed him to rescind that, obviously. And now he has rescinded his forced resignation. But as you mentioned, the complaint was not based on anything he did as a commanding officer. It was as speech that he made outside of the military context, in the context of a political campaign, mind you. He was running for office. He was making statements on various issues in the culture today from a religious perspective. The First Amendment affords him that right, for sure. But it was the subject of an investigation that's ongoing even to this day.
All right, so just for those of us who get the broad picture, what are the potential legal ramifications here? What are the legal issues that need to be considered, that people need to look at this and say, that's why this is so important?
Well, let's be sure that the individuals who sign up to defend our liberties, our constitutional rights, are entitled to those same rights, namely the First Amendment. You don't surrender your constitutional rights or your statutory rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and others just because you sign up for military service. So this individual that we represent was entitled to speak his mind. He was entitled to political speech. He was entitled to hold religious values and to espouse those values in life and in his speech. He didn't surrender those. He's entitled to the same Constitution that he swore an oath to defend, and we ought to stand up and defend him. So the rights at issue here are his First Amendment right to speak, his First Amendment right to associate with others for political and religious purposes, and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which protects members of the military from this very punishment.
So, so why the disregard for the law? Why do we continue seeing instances like this when the legal issues appear to be so crystal clear?
That's the sad part, isn't it, Jody? Because we've seen this before. I was on your program not 6-8 months ago talking about the attempted purge of religious adherents for the COVID vaccine mandates. And
Right.
There was just a blatant disregard for the law in that realm as well. So disturbingly, in the current administration, we see an open disregard for people of faith, for those who espouse conservative views. And as part of this particular complaint, there was a reference in the investigation to a Department of Defense instruction, which you might recall, we termed it and others termed it as an attempt to purge conservatives from the ranks of the military. And it was this instruction that said, we're going to root out extremism. And it was written so broadly to cover individuals like this officer, just because he espoused his religious values, because he engaged in political speech, and because he decided to run for office on truth and morality, including the type of materials that are being put in the local schools there, the transgender issues that seem to have run amok and gone crazy these days. And he was just espousing his views on what the response in culture and in government should be. He's entitled to that. But yet under the current administration, it seems we don't want those guys in the military service. We'll purge them by virtue of vaccine mandates, or we'll purge them by virtue of, let's look at all their social media and term them extremists, and we'll get rid of them. It's astounding what's taking place in the military right now. And these are our heroes. These are the ones who signed up to defend us. And they're entitled to the same protections that you and I are, and we should make sure that they receive them.
Absolutely. We've got less than a minute left. What are you hoping is going to come out of this, and where do things stand, real quickly?
There's currently the administrative proceeding that's going on, and he's represented by a good man in that regard as well. And we're leaning on the governor and threatening, if necessary, federal action to ensure that this man's protected. The Idaho governor can step in. He's the commander-in-chief of the Idaho National Guard, and he has the authority to say, knock this off. We're not going to have this no Christians in command policy. We're not going to recognize that. The First Amendment doesn't recognize it. The Constitution doesn't recognize it, and we're not going to recognize it. So we're asking him to basically rescind the findings of the investigator and reinstate this man to the role he deserves.
Thank you for being on the tip of the spear on this. Daniel Schmid, Liberty Counsel. Thank you. You guys are doing an awesome job. Thank you for standing for this infantry officer and thereby standing in behalf of every one of us. We greatly appreciate it.